Hey guys, can you believe that this is our 20th episode of Storytime Sunday? This is awesome. I'm trying to find myself in the video. There I am. I'm way over to this side. Yeah. So let me see if I can. Okay. So today is our 20th episode of Storytime Sunday. Um, it is. It has been a joy these 20 weeks, just sharing my stories with you and all that stuff. It's really been a great thing. Two things I love most in the world: preaching and telling stories. Most of my sermons, for those of you who are only YouTubers, you would have said, "Where is she? She hasn't preached in a while." But I have been preaching, but on Facebook, simply because it is too it is too difficult to do them both at the same time. So YouTube gets my Storytime Sundays, and Facebook gets my preaching, just because on Facebook I have a wider audience. Although I've been doing YouTube for longer, I've been doing YouTube for 9 years and Facebook for only like not even a year yet. So that's how that's working out. So if you want to see what I've been preaching about, you can add me on Facebook, um, or I can send them to you. Anyway, today's story is called Nothing But a Number. And it's about a 16-year-old boy who is his parents are both doctors, and he's been pressured by his parents to be a doctor. And he's a bit of a troublemaker in high school. He doesn't get into physical fights, but he tries to outsmart the teachers, never does his homework, never does anything. The teachers don't know what to do with him, and his parents don't seem to care. So there's one day where this one teacher, who is about in her mid-20s, she's in her mid-20s, where she sees him just drawing in a notebook that is not his school book, and she says, "Ethan, put it away." And he says, no. And then she's like, "Ethan, put the book away. It's time to do schoolwork and you need to be focused on me." And he says, and he rolls his eyes and he's like, "Okay." So he puts it away. And then a second later, he takes it out again when she has her back turned. And And then she walks over to his desk and holds out her hand. She's like, hand me that book. And he's like, and he rolls his eyes again and hands her that book. And he's like, she's like, you'll get it after class. And then after class, when okay, so the class continues, and what happens is, at the end of the class, she ends up talking to another student and forgetting that she has his book. And what happens is he is that later on in the day when she's cleaning up her classroom, she begins to clean out the drawer with his book, and she finds his book, and then out of curiosity, she knows she shouldn't do it, but out of curiosity, she looks to see what's in it. And lo and behold, to her surprise, it's the most beautiful drawings of buildings that she's ever seen, the most unique perspective of buildings that she's ever seen. Like these buildings, if you didn't know that these were drawn by a 16-year-old, you would have thought these buildings were drawn by a skilled architect. And what happened is she looks at these buildings, and she's absolutely stunned, not only at what a great artist he is, but at the at what a flair for design he has. And that whole next day, this teacher's a Christian, and that whole next day, she that night she prays for him, and that whole next day she looks for him, but she can't find him. And the day after that, she has his class, and then when she sees him after class, she says, "Can I speak to you, please, Ethan?" And he says, "Yes, Miss McEnroe," because her name is Jenny McEnroe. He says, "Yes, Miss McEnroe." He says, "Yes, Miss McEnroe," and she says, and she gives him your book, and she gives him the book, and she says, "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but those were some beautiful drawings of buildings I've seen in that book. I didn't mean to invade your privacy, but I was curious. I'm sorry." He's like, "Oh, that's no problem. I figured you would look at what's in it." She's like, "I looked at your classes, and they're all medical. They're all preparation for med school classes. Why aren't you in any architectural or building or art or even design classes. And Ethan looks down. He's like, well, my parents want me to be an architect. No, my parents want me to be a doctor. They think being an architect is a waste of time. So I have to do what my dad and mom want so that they'd be proud of me. Um, and she says to him that I shouldn't be saying this because I'm your teacher, but yes, you need to obey your parents. But if architecture and designing buildings is your passion, you should go for that. He says, you really think I'm good enough? And then she says, yes. And then they talk for a while about architecture and his love for buildings and his love for designing buildings. When he sees a new building, he just can't help but redesign it in his head. She says, it seems like to me you should be taking courses in architecture because that's what you're built for. Being a doctor is all well and good. We need doctors, but your passion is for architecture, Ethan. Think about it. And then she says, I will. He says, I will, Mrs. McEnroe. So from that day on, they actually, after class, spend time talking to each other and spend time just, she spends time encouraging him in his architecture, and he spends time soaking up wisdom. And there's one day where he comes to class early and sees her reading her little tiny Bible. And although in school you're not supposed to show what religion you are, he says, you're reading a Bible? She's like, yeah, I'm a Christian. And he's like, my parents don't go to church, not even on Christmas and Easter, but I've always been curious about religion. She's like, it's not about a religion, it's about a relationship with Christ. He's like, what's the difference? And she says to him, well, a relationship with Christ means that Jesus can be as close as you want him to be. He can walk with you like your best friend and be with you when you need him to be. And a religion is just do's and don'ts and answer my prayers, Lord. Although he does do that too, but a relationship with Christ is so much richer than just a religion, a religious thing. He's like, well, I'm lonely. My parents really don't pay attention to me. My friends are all about fast cars and girls, and that's not really me. I've always wanted a friend, so maybe this thing will help me. How do you get a relationship with Jesus? She's like, well, all you have to do is ask for a relationship with Jesus. Be honest with God and just tell him uh, what you're telling me and talk to him like you're talking to me. And that's all you need to do. He's like, really? That's it? That's it? And then he leaves and goes home. And that night, he can't stop thinking about what Miss McEnroe said about having a relationship with Christ. And that night he he says to God, lying in his bed, God, I don't know who you are, but you see I'm lonely. You see I'm surrounded by people who don't really care about me. My parents just want me to be a doctor. I feel like a showpiece for them. I don't feel like a real person. I feel like just kind of a showpiece for them to hang on their wall. He's like, God, I need real friends. And if you can be real friends and be like what Miss McEnroe said, I need you in my life. And then when he said that, just this peace and just this warmth of the Holy Spirit spread over his whole body. And he really felt the presence of the Lord come in his life. And the next day he stopped by Miss McEnroe's office and said that he accepted and told her, I did what you said last night, and it was amazing. This peace came over me that I couldn't have known about. And he proceeds to ask her all these kinds of questions. And also, it was kind of not her place because it's a public school, and she is his teacher, and she knew she could get in trouble, but the Holy Spirit was prodding her to answer his questions about the Bible and what to do next. So what happened is that he found a church that met online through the internet, and he also found out that church was right across the street. So he got involved in a youth group, and he got involved in a church and was a pastor and with a group of loving people, and he got to grow in his faith. And then even when he turned 17, and 18 and was about to graduate high school, he would stop by Miss McEnroe's office to talk about God, to talk about his faith, to talk about his love for architecture. So 2 years after he accepted Christ, he graduated, but instead of doing what his parents wanted him to do, he followed his passion for architecture. And he went to architectural college in another city. So he went to architectural college, and he was so good and so gifted that he became quickly one of the most talented young architects there. Like, his gifting and his love for architecture and his love for buildings. And the thing about him was he would absorb the culture of whatever he was building. So, and he was so good, he got A's in all of his classes that he took, like that his teachers called on him to show the other students who were struggling what to do. And he would even teach some summer classes when it was his senior year. And he went for his first of all his bachelor's degree and his master's degree, and then his PhD. And then after he went for his PhD, he got a job. No, he started his own architectural firm that took him all around the world. So he went to Europe, he went to the West Indies, he went to all over North America. He built he designed buildings for everyone, and he still had a strong faith in Jesus Christ. And when he was asked about what was his inspiration or whatever, he credited two people. He credited the Lord, and he credited his teacher, Miss McEnroe. And so he got all this worldly all this success and all this. He was really just one of the most sought after architects for any building, because the thing about him is he would embrace whatever culture was in the city and put that into the building. So he wouldn't just operate it in our architectural drawings. Each city he went to, he would tour the city to get a feel for the people and the atmosphere and what the building needed, not only aesthetically, but the feelings that the building needed to evoke, and put that all in the architecture. So about 10 years, about 10 years after high school, he had gotten his PhD and was winning all these awards, he decided to go back to his high school reunion, um, to see everybody, but really to thank Miss McEnroe for actually just encouraging him in his endeavor to be an architect. So when he saw her for the first time, she smiled at him. He's 26 now, 27, and she's now about 43 or 44. Still single, but she's on the board of trustees now. She's not a teacher anymore. Um, she was such an impeccable teacher that she got promoted uh, to, to vice principal and then principal and then on the board and then head of the board. So right now, within 10 years, she's head of the board, and when she sees him, it's like, "Oh, Ethan, how are you?" And then they start talking, and like, and they've each kept track of each other's careers, what each other has been doing, um, and um, and they take a walk outside, and uh, it's kind of catching up, and they exchange numbers and they exchange email addresses, and something uh, funny happened in both of them that wasn't there before, and they thought it was just pleasure in seeing each other again, catching up with each other again, and whatever. And he says to her, "Thank you so much. Without you, I wouldn't have had the success that I do, both in my career and my spiritual life. I wouldn't have gotten to know the Lord, and I wouldn't have gotten to know what a blessing it would be as an architect. My parents were against the idea at first, but when they saw how much it meant to me, and when they saw the success I was having as an architect, they admitted I was right to defy them, and now our relationship is better than it was." And she's like, "I'm so glad." And he helps her into her car, and he says to her, "Bye, Miss McEnroe." And she's like, "Oh, Ethan, you're 27 now. You can call me Jenny." And he's like, "All right, Jenny. God bless." And um, and then she drives away. And then after when she gets home, her cell phone begins to ring, and he's like, "It's Ethan. I just wanted to make sure you got home safe." She's like, "Oh, yes, I got home safe. Thank you, Ethan, for calling. Bye." So after that day, they start talking and going to museums and hanging out together, and just getting to know each other again, and going to different places. and just out for lunch and to shows, to museums, to art galleries, to different building functions, to different things like that. And slowly, feelings begin to develop that are more than friends feelings, but it's kind of weird because he's 26 and she is 43, so that's quite an age difference. And and so when she starts feeling these feelings, she tries to ignore them, although that she can feel the Lord saying that this is the way I want you to go, and then he can feel the Lord saying this is the way I want you to go, but they're both too afraid to say anything. Um, so they keep on going on these outings, and these things keep on developing. And one day after one of these outings, uh, they end up kissing each other, and they both feel kind of weird about it. And he says, you know what? I've been I've been falling in love with you for a long time, ever since I got back, and I've been really wanting to really explore this other part of our relationship. He says, I know I'm quite a bit younger than you. I know it'll take some work. I know I'm a former student of yours. He says, but I really feel that the Lord is saying yes to this relationship. And then she smiles and says, I have to admit, I've been feeling the same way, but I've been feeling I'm too old for you and that you need to find another younger woman. But I'd be willing to just see how it goes. So when they make the decision to date, um, that's when all hell is starts breaking loose. Because what happens is her friends, uh, she's having lunch with a friend one day who is a dear friend. She's been a dear friend for 20 years. She's she's a teacher, and she's like, what are you doing? He's 26, you're 43. What is going on? You can't do that. And he's a former student of yours. What will the board think? You can't. You can't do that. And he's like, you. She's like, you can't be a cougar. You're a Christian. This is so inappropriate. And her friends, she says, well, what's so inappropriate about it? She's like, well, he was your student and was, meaning in the past, he was my student 10 years ago, and he's now a 20, uh, he's now 27, and I'm 43. We're both single, consenting adults. I don't see the problem. And her friends are like, if you continue with this, I can't be a part of it. And and she's like, well, if you want to blow a 20-year relationship on who I'm dating, so be it. And her friend leaves and says, when you come to your senses, I'll be here. But until then, don't call me, don't talk to me. This is disgusting. And so the friend leaves, and other friends too, because the rumor spreads that she's in a relationship with this 27-year-old. And so all the rest of her friends leave. And on his side, his friends think it's some kind of, his so-called friends think it's some kind of joke, like, oh, how is it like being with an older woman? And like they make all kinds of rude, sexually lewd comments. They're just very rude. And he says, look, it's not about that. We're not even sleeping together. We're Christians, and we just feel that this is the way that God wants us to go. And he's like, trust me. Her friends like, trust me. His friends like, trust me. God doesn't have anything to do with it. She wants you as a boy toy. And his friends all laugh. So her friends are leaving. While his friends are laughing, and it's all just putting kind of, so he says to his friends, you know what, if you're not going to be supportive of my relationship and have all these negative things to say, I don't need you in my life. And then he just walks away from them. So he gives up his friends, her friends walk away. Basically, it's just the two of them. And like, in spite of all of this, they're there for each other. They pray together. They're like they really just are each other's anchors. They pray together. They ask the Lord the wisdom. They read the word together on the phone. And one day, after like a year and a half of dating, they're walking one day, and then there comes this beautiful clearing in the woods where there's this table all set up, and they sit down to have dinner. Now he's looking a bit nervous, and she's like, what's wrong? And he's like, oh, nothing. And then in the middle of dinner, after dinner, when dessert happens, on under like, she's having one of those mini cake platters with all these different cakes. So when she gets to the end of all these different cakes, there's a cheesecake, chocolate cake, all these different cakes, and when she gets to the end, she looks in the cake box expecting another cake, but in that cake there's a ring. In that cake box there's an engagement ring, and he proposes that they get married, and she says yes, and she's so happy. But the people around them are not happy. Like, they're both, you're getting married? why are you marrying such a baby and whatever? So, and her so-called friends try to uh, they tell her boss what she's been doing, that she's engaged to a former student, and they kind of, and then one day she gets a summons from the board to say that somebody brought forth a complaint of her indecent lifestyle and that she is not being decent, and that she was dating somebody who was 16 in high school, and you know, which was not true. He was not 16, he was 26 or 27, but they made it look like it was something illicit, um, which it wasn't. But anyway, after all that, there was a hearing for her to keep her job because they didn't want someone of such low moral character being the head of the board. So anyway, what they did together was fasted and prayed for her to not lose her job, and and he they both kept hearing the Lord say, "I will be with you in the fire. This is a relationship test. I'm with you. I'm for you. Nothing can harm you. The weapon can be formed, but it won't prosper. And every tongue that rises against you, I shall condemn." So the Lord begins to like minister to them so greatly in this crisis. And what was designed to crumple them, it was actually making their relationship stronger. Not only their relationship with God stronger, but their relationship with each other stronger. And at the end, she got to keep her job because she says, "Your Honor, I wasn't," not in front of the judge, but she said I wasn't inappropriate. We didn't have a relationship uh, of that caliber when he was in high school. Yes, I taught him, but it was totally appropriate. It never went outside of the propriety of student and teacher. Not until he was of legal age, and I was not married, and he was not married, and we liked each other, so we decided to go out. And he's like, and she's like, if my personal life is a problem and it's going to affect my job, so be it, I'll leave. But this was brought about by a spiteful teacher who's been jealous of me for years. Um, and I hope you have the good sense not to believe her. And she had witnesses come forward to vouch for her character. He had witnesses come forward to vouch for his character. Um, because in the complaint, she said Um, it was stated that he deserved to lose his business because he was being inappropriate with a school trustee. So, although it was mostly her on trial, the friend brought them both in. So, they needed character witnesses on both sides. So they prayed and got character witnesses on both sides. And in the end, um, she got to keep her job. And not only she got to keep her job, but she got promoted, and his business began to do so well. God was increasing his business. And then a few months after that, they got married. And about a year after that, at about 44 years old, she found out that she was pregnant. And so th- they were scared at first because, a baby after 40 is just so difficult. The pregnancy after 40 was so difficult. And people were negative. There were a lot of people that were positive that congratulated them, but there were people that were negative that were saying, "How could you have a baby this young?" And they kept on believing that if God wanted this to happen, it would happen without any problems, and that's what happened. So the baby came out without any issues, without any health concerns, and the pregnancy was God given. It was like so easy, like it was like her first pregnancy, although it was high risk, what the world would say, but it was really God ordained for this child to come into the world. And they called her Joy because she was their joy. So I pray that you enjoyed this sermon, this Storytime Sunday YouTube. Join me next week for Storytime Sunday 21. Bye.